Stop pretending. You are not a good listener. Nobody is. Your mouth may be closed, but your mind is already moving, already arranging the next sentence, already protecting the image you want to keep. That is the shocking truth. Most people do not listen. They reload, they defend, they wait, and while they wait, they lose the room, they lose the truth, they lose power. Because the person who feels heard will trust you faster than the person you impress. Learn to truly listen, and you will become the calmest force in any room you enter. Chapter 1. The noise inside you. The room does not get loud when people start talking. It gets loud long before that. It gets loud the moment your mind decides it already knows what matters. It gets loud when you stop receiving and start preparing. That is where your listening breaks. Not in your ears, in your ego, in your hurry, in your need to stay sharp, stay relevant, stay ahead. You think you are present because you are looking at the speaker. You think you are respectful because you are quiet. But quiet is not the same as silence, and silence is not the same as attention. Your mouth can be still while your mind is fighting for control. This is where most people stop. They confuse not speaking with listening. They call restraint understanding. They call patience wisdom. But under the surface, they are busy. They are editing the other person while the other person is still talking. They are searching for holes, waiting for mistakes, building replies that make them sound smart. The truth is, that inner noise costs more than people think. It keeps you from hearing the sentence beneath the sentence. It keeps you from noticing what is shaky, what is hidden, what is true. Think about the last serious conversation you had. Not a casual exchange, a real moment. Somebody was trying to tell you something important. Maybe they were angry, maybe ashamed, maybe unsure. While they spoke, what happened inside you? Did you actually stay with them? Or did your mind drift toward defense, toward fixing, toward proving something? Did you start comparing their words to your own pain, your own story, your own answer? Most people do, fast, almost by reflex. Stop for a second. Think about this. How often do you listen just long enough to speak? That habit is not harmless. It shapes every relationship you have. When people sense that you are waiting instead of receiving, they pull back, they shorten the truth, they clean up the mess, they give you the safe version. You may still get words, but you do not get access. You do not get trust, and without trust, influence stays shallow. You can talk louder, you can talk longer, you can talk better. It will not matter. Power does not begin when you control the conversation. Power begins when the other person stops bracing and starts revealing. The truth is, most people are starving for that feeling. Not praise, not agreement, not advice. They want the rare relief of not being interrupted inside someone else's head. They want to feel that their words reached a place that was not already crowded. That is why a strong listener changes the temperature of a room without raising a voice. People relax around that kind of discipline. They open around it. They speak more honestly around it. Not because you are charming, because you are clean. Clean attention, clean silence, clean control. You cannot fake that for long. People feel the difference. They know when your eyes are on them, but your mind is on yourself. They know when you are acting patient while secretly trying to steer the outcome. They know when your silence is only a pause before a performance. That is why real listening is harder than talking. Talking lets you manage perception. Listening strips that protection away. It asks for discipline without applause. It asks for control without display. Sit with that. Let it sting. You may have spent years trying to sound powerful while missing the habit that actually creates power. There is another reason this inner noise keeps winning. It protects you from discomfort. If you really listened, fully listened, you would have to face things you cannot control. another person's pain, another person's anger, another person's truth about you. It is easier to prepare a reply than to receive a reality. It is easier to fill the silence than to let it expose what is unfinished in you. This is why shallow listeners are rarely weak in speech. They are weak in stillness. They cannot hold open space without rushing to close it. Your reply is not proof of strength. Your silence is not empty when it is disciplined. The person who can stay present under pressure owns more power than the person who can talk the fastest. That is the first wound you need to see. You are not missing information because people refuse to share. You are missing it because your own noise blocks the door. And until that noise is exposed, every conversation becomes smaller than it could have been. Every connection becomes thinner. Every chance to gain real ground disappears under the surface while you are busy building sentences no one needed yet. So the issue is not whether you care. The issue is whether your care is strong enough to override your impulse. Whether your attention can stay clean when your ego gets hungry. Whether your silence can hold when your identity feels threatened. That pressure is coming. It always does. And what rises inside you in that moment says more about your character than anything that comes out of your mouth, because the next trap is even uglier. It does not just make you noisy, it turns every conversation into a fight you think you have to win. Chapter 2. Waiting to attack. You can feel it if you are honest. The slight tension in your jaw, the tightening in your chest, the small rush that says, answer that, correct that, fix that, defend that. It happens so fast that you call it instinct, you call it intelligence, you call it confidence. But most of the time it is none of those things. It is a threat response, wearing polished clothes. It is the habit of turning someone else's words into a target the moment they touch your pride. That is why so many conversations never become real. People are not meeting. They are circling. Each person is waiting for the opening that lets them strike without looking insecure. A correction, a counterpoint, a personal story that takes the spotlight back, a clever line, a moral lesson. The room sounds civil, but underneath it is combat. Nobody leaves unseen. Nobody leaves settled. Nobody leaves changed. They just leave tired. This is where most people stop. They never question the hidden motive beneath their listening. They assume they are trying to understand when they are really trying to regain position. The truth is, when your mind listens for weakness instead of truth, you stop hearing the person and start scanning for leverage. You notice what can be challenged. You notice what makes you look better. You notice where you can steer the exchange back toward ground that favors you. That habit feels strong in the moment. It feels sharp, it feels safe, but it makes you predictable. And predictable people do not carry deep influence. Watch what happens when somebody says something that touches a sore place in you. Maybe they question your effort. Maybe they misunderstand your intent. Maybe they bring up a pain you thought you buried. In that instant, your listening narrows. Your body is still there, but your attention is gone. You stop asking what they are trying to say. You start asking, how do I protect myself? Once that shift happens, the truth is over. The rest is strategy. Pause here. This matters. The conversation usually dies long before the first interruption. Powerful people understand something weak people refuse to face. Defense is expensive. It steals awareness. It blinds judgment. It makes you react to tone instead of meaning. And reaction always puts you in somebody else's hands. The truth is, if another person can control your listening by touching your ego, then your ego owns you, not the other way around. A lot of people spend years training their speech and almost no time training for that moment. They learn confidence, they learn framing, they learn negotiation, they learn influence tactics. Yet the second a sentence threatens their image, all that polish collapses. They rush in. They explain too fast. They overstate, they correct before they understand. Then they wonder why people stop opening up to them. It is simple. People do not trust listeners who are secretly waiting to counterattack. You cannot hear the truth while defending the image. Control begins where reaction ends. If every sentence feels like a challenge, your mind is still at war. There is a hard truth buried here. Some people are not poor listeners because they are careless. They are poor listeners because they are scared. Scared of being wrong. Scared of being exposed. Scared of losing status. So they armor up with quick replies and sharp insight, hoping speed will hide insecurity. But speed never hides insecurity for long. It reveals it. The calmer person sees it. The stronger person feels it. And the speaker feels it most of all. The second they sense your hunger to defend, they start choosing safer words. You lose the raw version. You lose the useful version. Stop again. Think about how much truth has been edited around you because people did not trust your reaction. This is where listening becomes a discipline of emotional control. Not because emotions are bad, because an undisciplined emotion makes you easy to lead. When someone speaks, you are being tested to see whether they intend to test you. Can you stay open while something uncomfortable enters the room? Can you let a sentence land without grabbing it too early? Can you hear all of it before deciding what it means? That delay sounds small. It changes everything. The person who listens without instantly fighting for position becomes dangerous in the best way. Calm, hard to provoke, hard to manipulate, hard to distract. That kind of person sees more because they burn less energy on self-protection. They catch the pattern beneath the claim. They hear the need beneath the anger. They notice the lie hidden inside confidence. That is not softness. That is control. Real listening is not passive. It is an active restraint. It is a strength under command. It is the refusal to let your first reaction become your final response. Most people cannot do that. They are too eager to protect themselves, too eager to recover the upper hand, too eager to show they have an answer. And because of that, they miss the larger truth in front of them. The other person was not only speaking, they were showing you how they think, what they fear, what they hide, and what moves them. That is priceless information. But you cannot collect it while loading your weapon. Sooner or later, this becomes personal. Because beneath the urge to defend, there is something even more common and even more dangerous. Not the need to win, the need to be seen. Chapter 3. The hunger to be seen. Under almost every bad listening habit lies an ache. Quiet sometimes, loud sometimes, but always there. The need to matter to another person, the need to be known, respected, appreciated, and chosen. That need drives more interruption than arrogance does. It drives more fake listening than carelessness does. Because when somebody else is speaking, your ego often hears a threat it cannot name. If they hold the floor too long, will you disappear? If they bring their pain, will yours stay unseen? If they take up space, what happens to your place in the room? This is where most people stop. They blame poor listening on impatience and miss the deeper hunger beneath it. The truth is, many people interrupt because they are afraid of vanishing. They add their story too soon because silence makes them feel small. They rush to relate because they need proof that they also count. So what looks like a connection is often competition, not open conflict, subtle competition for emotional oxygen. You have seen it, maybe too often in yourself. Somebody shares something heavy. Before they finish, another person says, "I know exactly what you mean," then turns the moment toward their own memory. Somebody explains a fear. Another person reaches for advice they were never asked to give. Somebody speaks slowly, trying to find the right words. Another person speeds up the conversation because discomfort is harder to hold than to control. All of it comes from the same place, a restless self trying not to fade. Stop here. This is not kindness. It only wears the face of kindness. People call that relating. Sometimes it is. Most times it is theft. It steals the weight of the moment from the person carrying it. It sends a quiet message. I hear you, but not for long. Now let me step into the center. The speaker may smile, they may nod, they may say thank you, but inside they withdraw. They realize the room was never truly theirs. They were only borrowing it until someone else needed it back. The truth is, powerful listening requires you to survive not being the center. That sounds simple until you try it. Can you stay fully present while another person holds the emotional gravity of the room? Can you resist the urge to prove you understand? Can you let their words exist without tying them to your own identity? Most people cannot. The self keeps reaching out, wanting to stamp its name on the moment, wanting credit for care, wanting recognition for wisdom, wanting to be seen as deep. The need to be seen makes you blind. Attention that asks for applause is not attention. The strongest presence in the room is often the person asking for the least. There is nothing noble about making another person's pain your stage, but it happens every day, in friendships, in marriages, in meetings, in families, in hard conversations that could have healed something if somebody had just stayed out of the way. Instead, the listener grabs for relevance. They offer a faster story, a bigger wound, a smarter lesson, a stronger opinion, and the truth slips out of the room. Pause again. How often do you listen with a hand already reaching for the spotlight? This is why silence feels dangerous to so many people. Silence removes the performance. It exposes motive. If you are truly listening, you are not decorating the moment with yourself. You are not managing how thoughtful you seem. You are not waiting for the perfect line that makes you sound wise. You are holding steady while another person reveals something real. That kind of stillness feels like a loss to the ego, but it is actually a gain, massive gain. Because when people realize you are not competing with their expression, they drop their guard. Then you get access to what most never hear. That access is power, not loud power, quiet power. The kind that lets you understand people faster than they understand themselves. The kind that lets you influence without force, because your understanding is already ahead of their resistance. People move toward those who make them feel safe enough to tell the truth. Not safe from challenge, safe from being erased. That is an important difference. Real listening is not agreement. It does not mean you surrender judgment. It means you delay self-insertion long enough to know what you are actually dealing with. And that delay requires a self that is not starving, a self that can wait, a self with discipline, a self with enough inner weight that it does not need every conversation to feed it. This is where growth gets uncomfortable, because now the issue is no longer manners, it is identity. If you need every exchange to confirm your value, you will never listen with full power. You will keep shaping the moment around your hunger, and the hunger will keep hiding itself as empathy, insight, care, or connection. But underneath it all, the same question will keep running through the room. What about me? Until that question loosens its grip, another habit will continue to destroy your clarity. You will not just insert yourself into the conversation. You will force the other person into a story you already wrote. Chapter 4. The story you keep inserting. You rarely hear another person as they are. You hear them through the story already running in your head. A private script. Old conclusions, old fears, old labels. You decide what their tone means before they finish the sentence. You decide what their pause means. You decide why they said what they said. Then you listen only for details that support the version you already chose. The person in front of you speaks, but you are answering a character from your own inner theater. This is where most people stop. They think misunderstanding comes from a lack of effort. A lot of the time, it comes from too many assumptions. The truth is, your mind hates empty space. It fills gaps fast. It builds meaning out of fragments. It hears a few words, then rushes to complete the picture. That can help you survive quick danger. It destroys slow understanding, because real listening requires space. Your mind does not naturally want to give. Maybe somebody says, "I am tired." You hear rejection. Maybe somebody says, "I need time." You hear distance. Maybe somebody speaks with frustration. You hear disrespect. Maybe they go quiet. You hear disapproval. In each case, your interpretation enters before their meaning is fully known. Then your response comes from the story, not the truth. That is how simple conversations turn into conflict, not because words were unclear, but because your inner script was louder than the speaker. Stop for a moment. How much of what hurts you is actually interpretation? The dangerous part is that your story often comes across as righteous. It feels informed. It feels earned by past experience. You say, "I know this pattern. I know what this means. I have seen this before." But what you usually mean is, "I have been hurt before, and now I am listening through the scar." That scar may be real. The pain may be real. The caution may be understandable. Still, if you let old pain decide new meaning, you stop hearing people clearly. You hear echoes. The truth is, powerful listeners are not people with perfect instincts. They are people who question their first interpretation. They notice the story rising and refuse to worship it. They know that quick certainty often hides lazy perception, so they slow down, they test meaning, they ask, they check tone against context. They stay with what was actually said before racing toward what they fear was meant. Your first interpretation is not sacred. A scar can become a lens, and a lens can become a prison. Hearing clearly starts when certainty loses its throne. That discipline is rare because certainty feels good. It gives your mind the comfort of closure. It lets you act fast. It lets you protect yourself. But clarity often comes after discomfort, not before it. You have to sit in the unfinished space. You have to tolerate not knowing yet. You have to allow a sentence to remain incomplete while the other person keeps shaping it. That patience sounds small. It is brutal for people who live by assumption. Pause again. Ask yourself something plain. Do you listen to discover or to confirm? If you listen to confirm, every conversation becomes evidence for a case you have already built. You start collecting proof instead of receiving truth. Proof that they do not care enough. Proof that they always do this. Proof that you are right to stay guarded. Proof that your anger is justified. Once that pattern takes hold, listening becomes almost impossible. Not because your ears failed, because your identity got attached to being right about the story. And being right about the story can feel safer than being honest about reality. Reality is fluid, messy, hard to control. Stories are cleaner. Stories make you the injured person, the wise person, the misunderstood person, the strong person. Stories let you lock people into roles that protect your pride. But every time you do that, you lose information. You lose the living truth of who is actually in front of you today. Not who reminds you of yesterday. Not who fits your fear. Today. This matters even outside emotional conversations, in business, leadership, family, conflict, love, and trust. The person who hears beyond assumption always has an advantage. They are less reactive, less easy to fool, less trapped by projection. They notice what does not fit the script, and that is often where the truth is hiding. Most people ignore those signals because they are too busy defending their story. Powerful people lean in harder. So listening is not just about patience. It is about surrendering the fantasy that your first read is enough. It is about refusing to reduce another person to a role in your unfinished drama. It is about discipline at the level of perception. Can you let the person in front of you be new? Can you let meaning unfold? Can you hear without forcing? If you cannot, you will keep filling every pause with assumption. And that leads straight into the next weakness, the weakness that terrifies almost everyone, because it leaves them alone with themselves. Silence. Chapter 5. The fear of silence. Silence exposes you. That is why most people run from it. Not with their feet, with noise. They rush to clarify, rush to reassure, rush to soften, rush to cover the gap before it stretches too wide. The second a conversation goes quiet, panic starts whispering. Say something. Fix this. Rescue the moment. But the truth is, silence is not the enemy of connection. Panic is. Silence only reveals what panic cannot hide. This is where most people stop. They think silence means failure. They assume a gap in speech means awkwardness, weakness, or loss of control. So they stuff the moment with words that were never needed. They answer too early. They explain too much. They dilute what was just said because they cannot bear the pressure of letting it sit. The truth is, the people who fear silence most are usually the people who fear exposure most. Because in silence, there is no performance to hide behind. Watch a person who cannot hold a pause. The body tells the story before the mouth does. A nervous smile, eyes looking away, fingers moving, a laugh that arrives too fast. They are trying to manage the discomfort of not knowing what the silence means. But silence often means meaning is landing. It means emotion is rising. It means thought is still forming. It means something real is about to surface if nobody steps on it. When you rush in too early, you interrupt more than words. You interrupt emergence. Stop here. Let this settle. Not every pause needs your rescue. In fact, some of the most important things people ever say come after a pause that weaker listeners could not survive. A person starts speaking. Then they stop. If you stay calm, they go deeper. If you fill the space, they retreat. That is how fragile truth can be. Not because people are soft, because honesty often arrives slowly. It needs room. It needs a signal that it will not be cut off, judged too soon, or rushed into a cleaner shape. The truth is, silence is a test of inner control. Can you remain steady while nothing is happening on the surface? Can you stop your mind from writing disaster into the gap? Can you resist the urge to perform usefulness? Most people cannot. They need movement to feel safe. They need sound to feel relevant. So they speak when speaking costs them. They step in when stepping back would have given them more. Silence is where hidden truth gathers. If you rush to fill every gap, you teach people to stay shallow around you. The pause you cannot hold is the place your control breaks. There is also power in what silence does to other people. When you do not rush to fill it, they start hearing themselves. They notice their own contradictions. They feel the weight of their own words. They go past rehearsed answers. That is why a calm pause can be more influential than a sharp reply. It shifts the burden back to reality. No pushing, no theater, just space. Space is honest. Space does not flatter. Space asks, "Is that really what you mean?" Pause again. Think about the last time somebody gave you enough silence to hear your own truth. For many people, that almost never happens. They move through life, being cut off, interpreted, fixed, guided, managed, and hurried. Then, once in a while, they meet somebody who can hold a pause without fear. Suddenly, the conversation changes. They go deeper. They say the thing behind the thing. They stop performing. That is why listening builds influence faster than talking. Talking can impress. Silence can draw out reality, and reality is what changes people. Do not confuse this with passivity. Silence is not withdrawal. It is a chosen restraint. It is attention with discipline. It is a deliberate refusal to contaminate the moment with your anxiety. That is why weak people feel helpless in silence, and strong people feel informed by it. The same pause that makes a reactive mind panic gives a controlled mind access. This is where listening turns from a social skill into personal power. Because now the question is no longer, can you hear words? It is, can you hold yourself? Can you keep your ego still, your fear quiet, your assumptions suspended, and your need for motion under command? If you can, the room starts giving you more than sound. It gives you depth, it gives you a pattern, it gives you the truth that was waiting for someone disciplined enough to stay. And once you stop fearing silence, everything begins to change, because now you can start using it on purpose, not as emptiness, as a strength. Chapter 6. Holding the room. Once you stop running from silence, you notice something most people never see. The room has a pulse. It speeds up, slows down, tightens, opens. People try to control it with words, but words are only part of it. Presence shapes far more than speech does. The calm person changes the room before speaking, because everyone feels who is steady and who is scrambling. If you can hold yourself, you can start holding the space around you. This is where most people stop. They think influence comes from saying the right thing at the right time. That matters. But the truth is, timing is born from restraint. If you cannot hold the room, your words arrive with your anxiety attached. People hear the sentence and the strain beneath it. They feel the need inside it. They sense the push that weakens the impact. Controlled presence does the opposite. It clears the air around your words before they even arrive. Holding the room starts with attention that does not leak. When someone speaks, you are not only hearing content, you are sensing rhythm, pressure, hesitation, energy, avoidance, and the subtle movement of emotion. None of that is available to a distracted mind. None of it is available to a listener who is still fighting their own reactions. But once your inner noise drops, the room becomes legible. You start seeing how one person dominates to avoid exposure. How does another person joke to cover fear? How a third person goes quiet, not because they agree, but because they have given up being understood. Stop for a second. The room is always telling the truth. Most people are too noisy to hear it. This is why listening is such a force multiplier. It gives you information nobody hands you directly. A person may say they are fine while their tone drags behind the words. A leader may sound decisive while their pace reveals insecurity. A partner may say nothing is wrong, even as their silence feels hard, not calm. If you only hear the literal sentence, you stay on the surface. If you hold the room, you catch the fracture line underneath. The truth is, powerful people do not react to every sentence. They respond to patterns. They let the moment show itself. They wait long enough to tell the difference between a passing emotion and a real signal. That patience is not weakness, it is strategic control. Anybody can fire off a thought. Very few can stay still long enough to see what actually matters. Control of the room begins with control of your own urgency. Presence is felt before it is explained. The listener who sees the pattern never needs to chase the noise. Once you understand this, your role in conversation changes. You stop entering every exchange as a participant, desperate to contribute. You enter as an observer, with discipline, a person willing to let reality speak long enough to reveal its shape. That alone raises your weight. People feel less pushed by you. They feel less managed. At the same time, they feel more known. That combination is rare, and rare things carry power. Pause again. Think about the people who calm a room without trying hard. They are not always the loudest. Usually, they are not. They are measured. They do not jump to every emotional cue. They do not rush to fix the tension the second it appears. They let tension clarify things first. They know that discomfort often carries useful information. So instead of shutting it down, they hold it with steadiness. Then, when they finally speak, the room listens. Not because they demanded attention, because they earned gravity. This matters in conflict more than anywhere else. When emotion rises, most people shrink or explode. They go passive or aggressive. Both come from loss of control. The strong listener does neither. They stay with the facts, the feeling, the hidden need, and the larger pattern at the same time. That makes them hard to shake. It also makes them hard to fool. Anger does not blind them. Flattery does not seduce them. Pressure does not speed them up. That is what it means to hold the room. And yes, it takes discipline. You will feel the urge to step in too early. You will feel the pull to rescue, prove, smooth over, or dominate. This is where most people stop. They feel the urge and call it truth. But urge is not truth. Urge is energy. Energy needs command. If you can command it, you gain choice. If you cannot, you become predictable. And predictable people are easy to manage. So the work now becomes sharper. Not just hearing better, governing yourself better, building the kind of attention that does not fragment when pressure rises, training the kind of silence that does not collapse under tension, because presence without discipline fades, and discipline without attention becomes rigid. The next step demands both. Chapter 7. The Discipline of Attention. Attention is not a gift. It is a trained weapon. Most people treat it like the weather. If they feel focused, they listen. If they feel distracted, they drift. If the conversation is easy, they stay present. If it becomes uncomfortable, they split. That is not discipline. That is dependency on mood. And mood has no loyalty to truth. If you want to listen with power, your attention must become a choice, not a convenience. This is where most people stop. They say they value connection, leadership, trust, and influence, but they cannot hold their attention on another human being for more than a few seconds without wandering into opinion, memory, planning, judgment, or self-protection. The truth is, fragmented attention creates fragmented understanding, and fragmented understanding creates weak decisions, weak bonds, and weak control. Look closely at what steals your attention in conversation. Sometimes it is obvious. Your phone, the room, a sound, a deadline. But the deeper thieves are internal. The need to compare, the need to evaluate, the need to prepare, the need to escape boredom, the need to speed things up because somebody speaks in a way that does not match your pace. Each of these pulls you out of the actual moment, not dramatically, quietly, a little here, a little there, until you are physically present and mentally gone. Stop here. Attention does not leave all at once. It leaks. That is why listening has to become deliberate. You choose where your mind returns when it starts drifting. You notice the drift without shame and bring it back, again and again and again. This sounds simple. It is hard, because bringing attention back means refusing every little temptation to re-enter your own world. It means giving another person uninterrupted reality inside your mind. No edits, no shortcuts, no secret escape route. The truth is, this kind of attention feels unnatural at first, because most people live in constant inward motion. Their bodies are in the conversation. Their minds are in 10 other places. That scattered state becomes normal, so normal that full attention feels intense, heavy, almost too intimate. You may notice discomfort when you really stay with someone. That discomfort is not a sign to back away. It is a sign that you are finally doing real work. Attention is respect, made visible. Discipline is returning, not drifting. Where your attention goes, your power follows. The disciplined listener also knows how to direct attention within the conversation. Not every detail deserves equal weight. Some words are filler. Some are shields. Some are keys. Your task is not to absorb everything with the same force. Your task is to stay open enough to notice what matters most, what repeats, what tightens the speaker's voice, what appears casual but carries pain, what gets skipped too fast, what question they keep avoiding. That is intelligent attention, not broad and blurry, focused and alive. Pause again. Ask yourself, when somebody speaks, do you hear their strongest signal or only their loudest sentence? That difference separates shallow listeners from powerful listeners. Shallow listeners chase obvious content. Powerful listeners track significance. They hear when a person uses anger to cover fear. They hear when someone sounds certain but keeps circling the same doubt. They hear what is repeated because repetition often marks pressure. People return to what matters to them, even when they do not mean to. If your attention is disciplined, you catch that and build understanding from it. This is also where patience becomes practical. A person may take 5 minutes to reveal what mattered in the first place. Most people get impatient long before that. They cut in, redirect, summarize too early, or offer solutions before the target is even visible. But if you can stay with the process, the speaker often shows you the center on their own. People talk around the truth before they say it directly. Attention lets you follow that spiral without getting lost. Discipline also means refusing to confuse listening with agreement. Your attention must stay clean even when you dislike what you hear, even when the person is wrong, even when their tone is unfair. That is hard. This is where most people stop. They think disagreement gives them permission to stop understanding. It does not. In fact, when the stakes are high, clear listening matters more, because if you misread someone you already disagree with, you multiply the damage. So your attention becomes a standard you hold under all conditions, not only when the speaker is pleasant, not only when the subject flatters you, under pressure too, especially there, because calm attention under pressure is rare, and rare habits change the quality of your life. They change what people reveal to you. They change what you notice. They change how wisely you act. Soon, if you train long enough, attention becomes deeper than words. It starts with hearing what speech alone cannot convey, and that is where listening begins to feel almost surgical. Chapter 8. Hearing what is not said. By now, words are no longer enough for you. They still matter, but you know better than to stop there. People speak with more than language. They speak with timing, tension, avoidance, softness, force, withdrawal, and the things they almost say before turning away. If you only listen to what is spoken directly, you will miss half the message, sometimes more. This is where most people stop. They hear content and ignore the signal. They collect facts and miss the meaning. The truth is, what is unsaid often carries the heaviest truth in the room. Not because people are trying to deceive you every time, because human beings rarely reveal themselves in a straight line. They hesitate, they protect, they test safety. They hint before they confess. They circle before they land. So you learn to hear the edge of the sentence, the slight delay before an answer, the quick shift in tone when a certain name comes up, the joke that appears exactly where pain should have been. The overly polished explanation feels rehearsed, the sudden tiredness in someone who claims they are fine. None of these things proves anything by itself. That matters. A weak listener jumps to conclusions. A disciplined listener gathers patterns, quietly, patiently, without forcing the meaning too soon. Stop here. Listening beyond words is not guessing. It is noticing without rushing. That distinction protects you from fantasy, because once you start hearing subtleties, there is a temptation to feel clever, to assume too much, to read hidden motives everywhere. That is another trap. Power does not come from paranoid interpretation. It comes from grounded perception. You notice signals, you hold them, you test them against the larger pattern, you ask better questions, you let reality confirm itself. This is where control matters again. The truth is, when people feel truly heard, they often reveal what they were hiding from themselves. That is the psychology most people miss. Being heard lowers internal pressure. It reduces the need to defend. It quiets the performance. Once that happens, deeper truths rise on their own. Not because you dragged them out, because your attention gave them room to surface. That is why listening builds influence so fast. People trust the person who helps them reach clarity inside their own mind. The unsaid is often louder than the spoken. People reveal themselves in what they avoid with perfect consistency. Hearing deeply is not magic. It is patience with your eyes open. Pause again. Think about how many times somebody told you exactly what was wrong without ever saying it directly. This skill changes everything in close relationships. You stop taking every word at face value and start sensing the pressure beneath it. A sharp tone may not mean contempt. It may mean exhaustion. A distant answer may not mean rejection. It may mean fear. A long explanation may not mean honesty. It may mean control. When you hear beyond the surface, your responses become more precise, less emotional waste, less unnecessary conflict, more truth. It also changes how you move through rooms where power matters. In negotiation, leadership, business, family, or conflict, the person who notices what others skip gains a quiet edge. You see where resistance really lives. You see what somebody needs before they know how to ask. You see where trust broke. You see when an agreement is false. None of that requires aggression. It requires attention with restraint. This is where most people stop, because restraint feels slow. They want the answer now, the label now, the clean conclusion now. But deep listening refuses that hunger. It lets reality ripen. It waits for the full pattern. And in waiting, it often learns more than force ever could. Force makes people hide better. Real listening makes hiding harder. Still, hearing deeply is not the final shift. It is a doorway. Because once you can hear what is not said, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. People do not change only because you understand them. They change because being understood changes how they see themselves. That is the next level of power, not reading people, shaping what becomes possible inside them. Chapter 9. The Weight of Being Heard. There is a moment that changes people. You can watch it happen if your attention is clean enough. The shoulders lower a little, the voice steadies, the face softens. Something inside them realizes, I do not have to fight to be received right now. That moment is small on the surface. It is enormous underneath. Because the person who feels truly heard stops spending so much energy protecting themselves. And what rises in the space that protection leaves behind is often clarity. This is where most people stop. They think listening is only about gathering information. The truth is, listening also alters the person being listened to. When somebody feels heard, their mind organizes itself differently. Chaos starts lining up. Emotion loses some of its grip. They hear their own words more clearly. They find the truth they were circling. That is why being heard can feel almost medicinal without needing comfort or praise. It gives structure to inner noise. You have likely felt the opposite, trying to explain something while the other person cuts in, corrects, fixes, minimizes, or drifts. The more unseen you feel, the less precise you become. You start over-explaining, repeating, defending. Your words get worse because the space is wrong. But put that same person in front of somebody who can hold them without taking over, and the whole system changes. Their thinking sharpens. Their honesty deepens. Their nervousness loosens. The room becomes usable. Stop for a second. Being heard is not a luxury. It is psychological permission to become clear. That is why the best listeners carry unusual influence. Not because they dominate, because they help people reach themselves. And people do not forget that. They remember the rare person who did not rush them, reduce them, or compete with them. They remember who gave them enough silence to locate the truth. That memory becomes trust. Trust becomes openness. Openness becomes influence. The truth is, most efforts to gain influence are backward. People talk more, push harder, explain longer, display more certainty, hoping that force will create respect. Sometimes it creates compliance, rarely loyalty, rarely depth. Real influence comes faster when the other person experiences you as a place where honesty becomes possible. Then your words matter more, because your attention already proved your strength. The deepest form of respect is accurate attention. People open to those who stop trying to conquer them. To make somebody feel heard is to lower the walls around their truth. Pause again. Think about the people whose opinions still matter to you. Often, it is not the loudest person. It is the person who understands you before correcting you. This does not mean you become agreeable. It does not mean you stop confronting lies. It means your challenge comes after understanding, not in place of it. That order matters. When people feel accurately heard, they can tolerate the harder truth. They may still resist it, they may still dislike it, but they know you did not attack a caricature. You dealt with what was real. That changes the force of your words. It also changes your own identity. You stop chasing relevance through performance and start carrying relevance through presence. You no longer need to prove your insight every 5 minutes, because your value no longer depends on constant display. That makes you calmer. It makes you harder to bait. It makes your speech cleaner, because it comes from observation rather than panic. And people feel that difference immediately. This is where most people stop, because they still want credit. They want to be seen as the wise listener, the grounded leader, the calm one in the room. But the moment you start performing the role, you contaminate it. The work is quieter than that. You listen because truth matters. You stay because control matters. You hold space because power, without understanding, is brittle and short-lived. When you do this long enough, listening stops being a tactic. It becomes a character. It becomes the way you move, the way you assess, the way you love, the way you lead, the way you protect your own mind from noise and false urgency. And once that shift is real, there is only one thing left. You no longer try to sound powerful. You become the quiet force that other people feel before they can explain why. Chapter 10. Becoming the quiet force. At a certain point, the work stops feeling like a technique and starts feeling like identity. You are no longer trying to remember to listen better. You are no longer forcing pauses because somebody told you it is good practice. You are no longer performing calmly while your mind races beneath the surface. Something deeper has changed. Your attention has weight now. Your silence has purpose. Your control is no longer cosmetic. It is built into the way you meet reality. This is where most people stop. They want the appearance of strength without the discipline that produces it. They want to look composed. They want the right phrases. They want the image of depth. But the truth is, people feel what you are before they trust what you say. If your stillness is fake, they sense the strain. If your attention is partial, they feel the split. If your silence hides calculation instead of control, they tighten. The room always knows more than your performance does. The quiet force is different. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to dominate every exchange. It can wait. It can observe. It can let another person reveal their pace, pressure, motive, and need. It can stay with discomfort without collapsing into reaction. That is what makes it powerful. Not a mystery for the sake of mystery. Not coldness. Not distance. Clarity with restraint. Stop here. Real power gets quieter as it gets stronger. You see this in people who have done the work. Their questions land cleanly because they listened long enough to ask the real question. Their corrections hit harder because they understood before they spoke. Their presence settles conflict because they are not feeding it with their own hunger. Even when they say little, others lean in, not because silence is a trick, because disciplined attention creates gravity, and gravity does not need volume. The truth is, listening has been training you for more than conversation. It has been training you for self-command. Every time you resisted the urge to interrupt, you strengthened restraint. Every time you questioned your first interpretation, you weakened the illusion. Every time you held silence without panic, you built steadiness. Every time you stayed present under emotional pressure, you proved that your reactions do not rule you. That is bigger than communication. That is character. Power begins where impulse loses authority. The strongest person in the room is often the least desperate to be noticed. To listen without fear is to stand in reality, without armor. Pause again. Let that sink in. This was never only about hearing people better. It was becoming harder to control from the outside because you are no longer so easy to disturb from the inside. That changes every room you enter. In personal conflict, you stop escalating nonsense just because it knocks on your pride. In leadership, you stop confusing noise with insight. In love, you stop stealing moments that were never about you. In a family, you stop repeating the old cycle of talking over what was actually hurting. In work, you stop wasting energy chasing the appearance of value and start creating real trust. The results are practical, but the root is internal. Discipline, silence, choice, truth, power. This is where most people stop, because the final cost is the hardest to accept. You must give up the addiction to immediate self-expression. You must surrender the false safety of speed. You must let other people exist without using their words to feed your ego, confirm your story, or trigger your defense. That cost feels like a loss at first. Then it becomes freedom. Freedom from proving, freedom from reacting, freedom from the noise that once owned your attention. And once that freedom takes hold, something rare happens. You no longer enter a room trying to win it. You enter ready to understand it. That shift alone makes you more dangerous than the loudest person there. Because loud people can be resisted, performers can be ignored. But the person who sees clearly, listens deeply, and speaks only after the truth is visible, carries a kind of authority that does not need permission. The truth is, this is how powerful people listen differently, not with better manners, with stronger minds, with cleaner motives, with attention that does not bow to ego, with silence that does not fear exposure, with control that turns every conversation into information, every pause into possibility, and every human being into a clearer signal. So when the next conversation comes, do less than your impulse urges you to. Stay longer than your discomfort likes. Hear more than the sentence offers. Let silence do some of the work. Let the other person arrive before you decide who they are. This is where most people stop. Keep going, because the room is always waiting for the person who does not need to fight for power, only to hold it. The loudest mind rarely hears the deepest truth. Silence becomes power when your ego stops trying to fill it. People trust the person who makes honesty feel safe. Control is not in speaking first. Control is in not needing to. When you finally listen without fear, the room changes before you do.